Today, Trump fires a US labor official over data and gets an earlier than expected chance to reshape the Fed. 2 US nuclear subs are moved after what Trump calls provocative statements from Russia. And we look back at a big week in US earnings, particularly in the tech sector. It's Saturday, August 2nd. This is Reuters World News, bringing you everything you need to know from the front lines in 10 minutes every weekday. I'm Tara Oakes in Liverpool. US President Donald Trump has ordered the firing of a top Labour Department official after a weak scorecard for the US jobs market. He's accused Erica McIntyre without evidence of manipulating the latest US jobs data figures. It adds to the growing concerns about the quality of economic data published by the federal government. Meanwhile, federal Governor Adriana Kugler has unexpectedly resigned, opening the door for a new appointment to the Fed. Michael Darby, based in New York, covers the Fed for us.
So this Kugler resignation comes in the context of what's been a pretty rough battle between President Trump and the Federal Reserve, basically since Trump has returned to office. Trump has been pressuring the Fed pretty aggressively to cut interest rates. He's called the Fed chairman names. He's speculated about firing him multiple times. And throughout all of this, the Fed has been pretty resistant to the president's rhetoric and has instead, what they would say, they're focusing on the economic data.
So what does this potential replacement mean for any interest rate decisions the Fed might make in the near term?
So we obviously don't know who he's going to put in there and how quickly it will happen, but it potentially gives the president a chance to put in a person who would back his hopes for low interest rates. So you might get another official on the Federal Reserve who might push aggressively for rate cuts, which would put them at odds where most Fed officials are at this point in time.
And on the international stage, President Trump says he's ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions. That's after former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said Trump should remember Moscow's Soviet-era nuclear strike capabilities of last resort. Trump has grown frustrated with what he sees as President Vladimir Putin's failure to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine, saying Russia has until August 8th to agree to a ceasefire or be hit with tariffs. Alex Marrow is here to help us unpack it. So Alex, what's been the reaction in Russia so far to this submarine announcement?
Actually, there's not been any substantive reaction at the time of recording. I think it's safe to say that Russia will view this as a provocative step by the US administration. It's not quite clear exactly where they have been moved to. And security analysts that Reuters spoke to made clear that the United States already has nuclear-powered submarines that are deployed and capable of striking Russia. So the reaction is not yet clear, but we have seen somewhat a war of words this week between Trump and Medvedev, which has escalated to this point. So my expectation would be that Medvedev may want to respond to this in due course.
And what about that deadline for a ceasefire? What are we hearing from Russia about that?
So again, reaction's been fairly muted. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia had taken note of Trump's shortened deadline, but said that Russia's what it calls a special military operation in Ukraine will continue. And I think generally on this threat from Trump, Russia feels quite insulated from Western sanctions now. There was certainly a hit in 2022, but Russia has managed to develop what it calls a feeling of immunity in some regards.
And Russia is also expecting a visit from US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, right? What can we expect from that?
Witkoff has met Putin a few times since President Trump returned to the White House. The two seem to have quite a good working relationship, but ultimately there's been no significant breakthrough. There's been no ceasefire. We would expect Witkoff to be pressing home Trump's message and that there is this deadline that has been brought forward. But I think it's unlikely that Russia will be prepared to make any concessions at the moment, especially as Putin particularly believes that the momentum is really in his favor.
I spoke to Steve Witkoff. We had a great meeting with a lot of people, and the primary meeting was on food.
President Trump there after Witkoff visited a US-backed aid operation in Gaza that the United Nations says is unsafe. The site's run by the US and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Many foreign governments and humanitarian organizations have been strongly critical of the GHF. The UN says more than 1,000 people have been killed trying to receive aid in Gaza since the GHF began operating, most of them shot by Israeli forces. The Israeli military has acknowledged that its forces have killed some Palestinians seeking aid and says it's given its troops new orders to improve their response. The GHF itself says nobody has been killed at its distribution points and that it's doing a better job of protecting aid deliveries than the UN. Ghislaine Maxwell has been transferred from a Florida prison to a lower security facility in Texas. She's been serving a 20-year sentence for helping late financier Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. The move comes a week after she met with Deputy U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche, who said he wanted to speak with her about others who may have been involved in Epstein's crimes. Maxwell was found guilty in a 2021 trial. She's asking the US Supreme Court to overturn her conviction. Asked by Newsmax about the possibility of pardoning Maxwell, President Trump has said, "I'm allowed to do it, but nobody's asked me to do it," adding, "I know nothing about the case." Lawyers for Maxwell, Epstein, and their alleged victims are due to share their positions on the potential unsealing with the judges in filings on Tuesday. A Bureau of Prisons spokesperson says they cannot comment on an individual's prison assignment. It's been a busy week in company earnings, with tech behemoths like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta reporting results, as well as household staples like Procter & Gamble. And as President Trump's tariff agenda rolls on, the added cost to companies is in focus. David Gaffin is our US companies editor.
This was a huge week for the big tech bellwethers that have been leading the market for a good long period of time. And we had results from across a number of other sectors. We had the big oil companies. We had some of the big consumer names, the automakers. And the thing is that about 81% of companies so far have beaten their expectations. That's more than the average. There are some sectors that are doing better than others. But of course, the market has been pretty much steadily hovering at the highs, despite all of the concerns that people have over the ever-shifting tariff policy, a weaker than expected jobs report, and some hotter than expected inflation figures.
So break it down. How are some of those industries that reported earnings this week faring?
I'll start with technology. We had Meta, the Facebook parent. We had Apple. We had Amazon. And we had Microsoft. 3 out of 4 of those did very, very well, surpassing expectations. I will note, however, that in this so-called Magnificent Seven, that include the ones I've mentioned already, along with the Google parent, Alphabet, Tesla, and NVIDIA, the big chip maker, there's been some notable bifurcation in performance this year. For instance, Apple is down quite a bit this year. NVIDIA is, of course, up a lot. Microsoft is up a lot. Amazon is kind of flat to down a little bit this year. And some of the issues involving Tesla and car sales. So they are, of course, an underperformer too. So it's not as if they're all going gangbusters.
And what about the companies that sell more everyday essential items?
Some big consumer companies are also talking about a combination of a couple of things. They're seeing lower income consumers are pulling back more on spending. Their spending is basically barely keeping up with inflation or slightly behind it. This has been something that has been mentioned by bellwethers like Procter & Gamble, which reported results this week. They came out and said that they were going to raise the prices on some products in the United States.
We hope you enjoyed our first Saturday edition of Reuters World News Headline Show. Now onto some more big news from us. Especially if you've missed our long-form episodes. Today's recommended listen is the first episode of our On Assignment podcast. We'll be doing deep dives behind the headlines. And today's is on immigration enforcement in the US, exploring the impact of stepped-up raids on workers, industries, and asylum seekers across the country. You can listen to On Assignment wherever you get your podcasts. For more on any of today's stories, visit Reuters.com or the Reuters app. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on a smart speaker, just ask for the latest news from Reuters 7 days a week. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.